Hey guys, I haven't done one of these videos where I'm actually talking to the camera in a while, so first one of those in a while. I'm using the webcam on my computer, which I hardly ever use anymore now that I got the Zoom camera, so that's interesting. And so in this video, I want to talk about habitat restores. There have been a lot of discussions in my YouTube comments, in the groups on Facebook, on some of the forums that are still active, about habitat restores and what it's like to volunteer at them and why are prices the way they are and why do some scrap fans and, issues with things like that. So I think I'm the only fan collector who has almost nationwide experience with habitat stores. I have worked for them and I've volunteered for them. When I'm now going forward, when I say worked, I'm going to mean both worked and volunteered. So just to clarify that, I have worked for them in the Midwest. I've worked for them in the South, and I've worked for them on the East Coast. And I've done training, I've done donation processing, and I've done deconstruction. And so I think I'm about as involved in the habitat process as anybody. And right now, I do electrical and lighting training for wherever it's needed in the general southern Wisconsin restores, which I haven't had to train anybody in a while. And then I also do volunteer as an electrical and lighting donation processor at one of the Madison restores, and occasionally do it for other stores in southern Wisconsin. So let's talk about it. So people that collect fans and lighting, we like to go to restores to hunt for old fans and lighting. And we're hoping to find the older, the cooler, the better. The more complete, the better working condition, the better. And but we'll buy unworking parts if necessary. And obviously want to pay as little as possible. Unfortunately, what we are looking for does not fit very well into Habitat's business model. We are not their target customers. So Habitat, they're a non-for-profit, but they're also a business. So they're a charity, but the purpose of the charity is to make money to build Habitat homes. It's a misconception that one of the goals of Habitat and one of the goals of the restores is to keep building materials out of the landfill. That's an advantage, and that's something they certainly talk about in their promotional material. And there used to be, back when the restores were more locally managed, that used to be one of the goals of a lot of the restores. But now everything's very corporate. There's a corporate headquarters and training for all the managers and whatnot nationwide and stuff like that. And they want to have all the stores be as similar as possible, which is easier said than done. And the goal is not to keep materials out of the landfill. It's a good thing, but it's not their goal. Their goal is to raise as much money as possible so they can build as many Habitat homes as possible. That is why the restore exists. And so if you go to volunteer at a restore and they have one of their volunteer coordinators or volunteer trainers that has been to the corporate seminars and is trying to do what corporate wants them to do, which is homogenize all the stores and have them similar, they're going to tell you during your training, just like they did for me, our goal is to make as much money as possible so we can build as many homes as possible. So well, but I want to keep stuff out of the landfill. It's great, but if that's why you're here, you're in the wrong place. We want you, the goal is to build as many Habitat homes as possible. So their goal is to sell as many things for as high a price as possible so they can build as many Habitat homes. And the one thing that was very clear to me with some of the corporate trainings that I attended and went through is that the focus is on the things that sell for the most money, which is cabinets and appliances in that order. So they care way more about cabinets than they do about anything else. Because cabinet sets can sell for thousands. And, look at plumbing parts and hardware and screws and cabinet hardware and light fixtures and little stuff like that that sells for 50 cents, $1, $5. That's nothing compared to a set. I mean, when I was at the restore earlier today, there was a set of these beautiful cherry cabinets that were marked at, I think, $1,500. They'll probably sell in a couple days because they were beautiful, they looked brand new, and they probably were over $10,000 if you bought them new. And that's a big thing about Habitat, is they want to sell stuff for 50 to 75% of what it costs new. That's their goal, that's their business model. So if you look at a fan that cost $100 at Home Depot, they want to sell it for $25 to $50. And so that's theoretically what you should expect to pay for anything that they sell at the restore. But again, they care the most about cabinets, and they care the most about, to a lesser degree, appliances, because those are big ticket items. So one of the things with fans and lighting is it's very hard to convince them to spend floor space and volunteer hours on fans and lighting that may sell for $25, $50 at the most, maybe $100 for a really nice thing, when you can sell cabinet sets for hundreds and thousands. They're like, why shouldn't, I think they would have whole stores of nothing but cabinets if they could, and eliminate the other stuff, because that makes them the most money. Of course, if it was the Habitat cabinet store, maybe less people would come, which is one of the things that I've always used in my arguments. Is like, hey, what if somebody comes in to buy a ceiling fan, or comes in to donate a ceiling fan, and they end up seeing the cabinets and buying a set of cabinets? That makes more money for the restore. So that's one of the arguments I've used when I've been trying to encourage them to spend more time on fans and lighting, is that if you have a store that people know that has everything, they'll come for lots of things, and then they may end up buying the big ticket items. That's a tangent, and we'll come back to that later. But they care the most about the big ticket items, and then they want, again, their goal is 50 to 75% off, but really they want to price the stuff as high as possible for where it'll still sell. Because sometimes you'll find stuff in the Habitat restore that's priced as much or more than it would sell for new. And I raised this at one of the trainings that I was at. I said, hey, this is an issue. And they're like, no, it's not an issue. And I'm like, it's kind of an issue, because if I come to the store and I see something and I know it costs more to buy a used one here than it does to go to Menards and get a new one, that's going to really bother me. And they're like, well, some people might want to pay more so they can give more money to Habitat. They don't care if it's priced too much, because their thing is somebody will buy it. And if nobody buys it, they'll throw it away and make more space for cabinets. I'm not exaggerating. This is literally pretty much the corporate attitude, because again, their goal is to raise as much money as possible to build as many Habitat homes as possible. So the goal is 50 to 75% off, but if it ends up being more, as long as it sells, they're fine with that. If it ends up being more than it costs new, they're fine with that. They prefer stuff that's new, because the average customer is going to buy it. The average customer is going to prefer something that's still new in the package versus used. The average customer is going to prefer something that is recent rather than vintage. There are enough people out there that, lots of people like vintage lighting, lots of people like the vintage look. Sometimes people will come in and buy a brass fan, not because they're a collector, but because they like that look. But as you see from my restore videos, if I put out a brushed nickel fan, it sells in a couple days. If I put out a polished brass fan, it sells in a couple weeks. So there are some Habitats that won't even put out brass stuff because it takes longer to sell. Once again, their goal is to sell as much stuff as quickly as possible for as high a price as possible so they can build more Habitat homes. And they really don't care if they cater to people who aren't buying $1,000 cabinet sets. Because, a fan collector, a lighting collector is not going to buy a lot of big ticket items. And, that's not their target customer. I've been to some restores where they don't have a lot of used stuff. They've got enough stores that donate their overstock, and like manufacturers that donate their leftovers or their scratch and dents or whatever you want to call it. And they don't even take used stuff. They only take new stuff because they get so much new stuff in. So again, they're also not really in the business of turning down donations, because again, they're hoping that somebody comes to donate something and then they end up buying a cabinet set. So that's why a lot of the restores, they get fans donated. They don't sell fans. They put them directly in the scrap. And they get paid a few cents a piece for scrap, and so they at least make some money off of it that goes towards building more Habitat homes. Some restores will take lighting and put the majority of it, anything that's not brand new, directly in the scrap. Again, they still take the donations and they just throw it right away, because then they still get some money. They still get that person coming to the store. They might go in and buy a cabinet set. And so, that's why a lot of the stores don't take older stuff. They don't put older stuff out, especially because the average customer isn't going to buy a fan if they think there's a chance it won't work, which is why the store I'm at, we test everything. All the fans and lighting, we test it. And so, and even that we advertise that we test it, we still get people to come in and say, is this tested? Do you know this works? Yes, we've tested it. We know it works. So most habitats don't have enough volunteers to spend time testing every light, testing every fan. Most habitats don't have volunteers that know enough about fans to know how to make sure every fan has all the pieces. They don't know the difference of a hugger mounting bracket versus a ball and socket mounting bracket. There's a lot of things most restores don't have, and it's just not in their best interest when they can have their volunteers concentrating on testing a freezer. We know how to do that. Okay, let's put it out for sale. Testing a stove. We know how to do that. Let's put it out for sale. Don't even need to test the cabinet set. It goes right out for sale. So the big ticket items, are easier to test. They're easier to deal with. There's not pieces that get lost. A lot of the stores, they sell fans and then the customer brings it back even if there's not a return policy. It didn't work. It didn't have the mounting bracket. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. But if you get enough irate customers asking you to return something, even if you don't have a return policy, eventually, we're going to stop selling this thing. We're going to stop taking it. So, and again, even when you can convince them to take fans and sell fans, not only is it a thing they don't want to put too much time and too much floor space into it. They want to concentrate on big ticket items, but then the fans they do put out, they want to sell for as much as possible. Because again, our thing is, if we put it out, somebody will buy it. If nobody buys it within a week or two, we scrap it. So, if somebody's going to pay $50 for a brushed nickel hunter, why would they sell it for $15? Again, they want to build as many habitat homes as possible. And nobody's going to pay $50 for a brass design house. So, generally speaking, that they'll put 15 on it. If it's not there, if it doesn't sell in a few weeks, it goes. Now, the restore that I'm at every week, we are one of the highest restores in the country in terms of the amount of sales that we do from electrical and lighting. I think something like 9% of our sales come from electrical and lighting, which sounds like a small amount, but that's really high for a restore. In most cases, it's much lower than that. And that's because we have several dedicated electrical and lighting volunteers who only focus on that. It's because we test everything. It's because we have people like Grant and myself that know enough about fans to know what's needed and, make sure that we have the mounting brackets and things like that. It's because we do good merchandising. We put signage on them so that when it's a Hunter, when it's a Casablanca, so we can charge a little more for them. Just overall, the other restore in Madison doesn't, and I've used to do videos there. I used to volunteer there in addition to do training there, and they decided they wanted to focus more on cabinet sets and appliances. So I don't volunteer there anymore because they barely put any fans and lights out. Because again, they want that space and that volunteer time for cabinets and appliances. They can make more money. But as a result, their lighting and fan sales is a much lower percentage. And they're fine with that because they make enough. They make more than enough on other stuff to make up for it. And that's the case with a lot of the restores. The one in Milwaukee that I was going to say Andy, but you guys would think Andy that lives in Madison. It's another Andy that volunteers at one of the Milwaukee restores that I've trained and done some work with. The one that he volunteers at, they only put out 5 or 6 fans at a time. They wait for them to sell, and they keep other ones in back. And they kind of, because again, they don't want to spend the floor space on putting a whole bunch of fans out when that floor space could be used for cabinets and appliances. I'm trying to think of what I didn't cover. So, again, their goal is to make as much money as possible. Their goal is to sell stuff that they can sell for the highest price as possible. Their goal is to price stuff as high as they can that people will still buy it. They don't care what specific customers are looking for. If you're looking for vintage stuff and they don't have any, tough, because the majority of people aren't looking for that. They know if they put out something new and modern, a lot of people will buy it. If they put out something more specific and vintage, a much smaller number of people will buy it. They don't care about that because that doesn't really work for their bottom line. What else? Yeah, so if you're going to volunteer, you can definitely do what I did and say, hey, I'm interested in specifically processing fans and lights. And again, the argument that I've always made, because I used to argue, we're going to keep the fans out of the landfill. They're like, we don't really care about that. Okay? Well, you're going to make more money from fans and lights. Even best case scenario, it's going to be 10% of their income, which is, again, cabinets are, and I'm making this up, but let's just say 50%. So they don't care nearly as much about that 10% as they do about the 50%. So, again, the only way I've gotten them to care about fans and lights is to say, hey, people are coming and looking for this stuff. If they find what they're looking for, they're going to keep coming back, and sooner or later they're going to buy cabinets and appliances. If people are coming to donate this stuff, and they go in and they see the stuff that they donated out for sale, and they feel like they made a difference, they're going to keep coming back. And, and they're going to eventually buy cabinets and appliances. And then I can also, pitch that, look, if we test all the fans and we test all the lights, we can mark them up. And then you can still make a higher percentage, One other thing we've started getting LED bulbs donated, and then we put them in all the fixtures, and then we put a sign on each fixture that says this includes LED bulbs, and then we can price the fixture $5 to $10 higher because people will buy it and pay more because it has LEDs. What else? Again, you look at my restore when a fan is a name brand, even if it's a name brand that isn't very good, if it's a name that people recognize, I make sure I put a sign on it, Hunter, Hampton Bay, etc. And then, can price it $5 higher. If it's a showroom brand, I'll generally print out from Amazon what it sells for on Amazon, and I'll tape that to the fan along with a sign. Because like earlier today, there was a Minka Aris, I think it was, and it was like a $500 fan. I was like, okay, well, 75% off is still $125. So I've taped the Amazon sign and a sign to the fan, and and then again, another thing, you can always price stuff high and then mark it down later. And that's one of the things I say, hey, if it doesn't sell in a week, we'll mark it down. So again, I hope that answered a lot of people's questions, because a lot of people have asked, why sell fans for $30, $40, $50? They should all be $15 a piece. If people will pay it, they're going to sell them for more. And if it's going to be that cheap, $5, $10, $15 a piece, it's just not worth their time and space when they've got big ticket items, and they only have so many volunteer hours and so many square feet, and square feet costs. I don't know what the going rate is for commercial property, but is it $10 a square foot? I don't know. $20 a square foot? I remember for office space, it used to be like $9 a square foot. So I don't even know what it is anymore. But yeah, so that's their focus. And so why are the pricing? Why don't they sell vintage fans? Why do they scrap most of them? Because A, they're not going to get as much for them as for newer stuff. B, they don't have people to test it, check, make sure it has all the things. If somebody does buy it and can't figure it out or can't get it to work or it doesn't work, they're going to complain. When stuff gets donated, if it doesn't have all the pieces, it's just easier just to throw it in the scrap. So again, when you're visiting restores, I always ask, can I go through what's in back? Can I look in the scrap? And sometimes they'll let me, and every so often you find something cool. But, so I covered why do they price stuff higher? Why do they not focus on vintage stuff? I mean, it's all the same reasons. They want to make money to build more habitat homes. And fans are not a big part of that. Lights are not a big part of that. They're a very small part of that. So the best thing that we can do is to volunteer. And when we volunteer, make a pitch how fans and lights can help them make more money to build more habitat homes without taking up space and time and resources that would otherwise go towards bigger ticket items like cabinets and appliances. And like I said, they are very impressed with what we've done at the Madison West store, because we've got one of the highest percentages from that department. We get a lot of repeat customers. We're known in southern Wisconsin for having one of the best restores for that type of stuff. We're known for having all our stuff tested, and so we get a lot of repeat customers. And again, it translates into not just more fans and lights sold, but into more cabinets and appliances sold. And so, it's working for us, but we still got the pressure from the people above the store manager. They're like, why aren't you selling your fans for more? I mean, literally, I've gotten called into the principal's office when we were selling fans for 15, 20, 30 bucks a piece and saying, well, why aren't you pricing your fans higher? And I'm like, well, because this is where they're selling. Well, what if you priced them $5, $10 higher a piece? Would they still sell? I'm like, some probably would. Others probably wouldn't. They're like, well, why don't you just, the ones that would sell for that, put those out, and the other ones, why don't you just toss them, because we need the space for other things. And that was literally a meeting that I had. And I was like, but the other ones are selling. Why not continue to make that money, So, it is what it is. Trying to think of what else. Yeah, I've gotten called in the meeting about that. I've got called into the meeting of like, hey, how can we make fans take up less space so we could have more room for whatever these other things are, which is when I suggested let's start hanging stuff from the ceiling, which we haven't done yet. I hope we eventually do. I'm just trying to make sure I don't leave anything out. So, hopefully that covered all the bases. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Again, I hope that more people can volunteer at Habitat stores and help save more fans from the scrap. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. And feel free to stop by any of the stores that I'm affiliated with, especially the Madison West store if you're ever in my area. If I'm in your area, I'll probably stop at whatever store is nearest you, because when I travel, I try to make the time to stop at different Habitat stores. Okay, well, I hope this was a helpful video, and I'm looking forward to your responses. Thanks for watching.